Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Bower, and I'm the managing principal at Cymic Scott.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lori Donna Pfannenbecker, and I'm the Unclaimed Property Principal here at Simon Scott.
So, Lori, it's my understanding that the state of Delaware just recently sent out invitations into their voluntary disclosure program for unclaimed property. If a company were to receive that letter, what does that exactly mean for them?
They did indeed, Matt. Letters were sent out last week. I believe recipients of those letters should probably be getting them this week or next. If you are a recipient of one of the Delaware VDA letters, you have 90 days to respond. And your choices really are to either enter into the voluntary disclosure program. If you choose not to, or if you fail to respond within the 90 days, you are then referred to the audit program under the Delaware Department of Revenue.
And what are some of the things that companies ought to be thinking about should they receive that notice? I know commonly, a lot of companies may get that and not even really understand what unclaimed property is. They may not potentially understand their exposure, but what are some areas that companies should really kind of dig into in order to make that determination over which road it might be beneficial for them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Matt. I think you need to really assess your unclaimed property footprint, right? What is your history in filing unclaimed property? Do you have a history? Do you have a robust history? A lot of companies might be filing just payroll and AP, which is very typical, but forget to look at other areas. So I think an understanding of what your potential liability is plays an important role in how you move forward in answering the VDA letter. I think you also, when you're looking at, is this something I want to move forward from a VDA versus an audit? There are a lot of differences between the two programs that you should probably also be made, aware of as you're making your decision.
Yep, absolutely. My understanding too is that both programs treat how they kind of put together their populations to ultimately test could potentially be very different as well. So under the VDA, they use a strict 90-day aging criteria, where under audit, they also may pick up voids that are voided after 30 days. So that could also expand the population. And most recently, from what we've also been hearing, is there's kind of been a change in the way certain auditors are maybe looking at accounts receivable, where they're not really giving much thought to the customer overall balance and just picking up credits that are over 90 days, where the guidance that was issued by the Secretary of State's program was to allow a netting and an offset, so debits against credits. So if you are a company and you're looking at your aging and you do see a lot of credits, that could be another consideration as well in terms of how much work and how much you're going to have to prove through the remediation phase.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Matt. I think that the differences between the two programs are certainly there. Another good point is when you're under the VDA program, there is a little bit more flexibility in your methodology and how you approach, right, how you approach your review. I think companies also need to start to look at, when we're doing an assessment, have you had some recent changes in your business, right? That perhaps historically hasn't led to an unclaimed property issue, but now might. Have you had a lot of acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions that potentially could also look or help generate, right, unclaimed property that you haven't historically had? And what do your records look like in all of that capacity? So there's a lot to think about, and 90 days is not a long time to kind of get your hands around the issue.
Right.
So it's certainly something that companies need to be on the lookout for.
Yep, absolutely. So with that, if a company were to receive a letter, what do you think is the most pertinent things to get their hands around in maybe, let's say, the first 30 days after they receive it?
I think it needs to get to the right hands within the organization, right? So if you're in receipt of that letter, understanding who is responsible for unclaimed property within your organization. And if you don't have anybody responsible and you have a void in this area, finding the correct individual to help move forward. And oftentimes, If you don't have anyone handling unclaimed property, and this is new to your organization, legal counsel is a great place to start internally, or your CFO or controller. And so understanding, right, who's going to help move this forward. If you do have someone internally, that's great. And oftentimes, getting an advocate to help you move things forward and to assess what potentially is out there, and the best way to respond to the notice, I think is very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, a lot of companies are probably not familiar with unclaimed property. They're certainly not going to be familiar with the mechanics of either an unclaimed property audit or even all the work that's included in the VDA. So I think sometimes too, companies discount the actual level of work that's still required even through the VDA versus an audit. So there is certainly a lot of guidance out there on what is required, what the Secretary of State expects companies to review. So it is also labor intensive. So if you are kind of short on resources, having that person that's going to be able to help you through that process is certainly key.
Agreed.
All right.
Yeah.
So with that, thank you for your time and kind of watching our little discussion on what a Delaware voluntary disclosure is. So if you're a company out there and you're incorporated in Delaware, be on the lookout for those letters. And as always, if you get one and you're not quite sure what to do with it, always feel free to reach out. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.